This might be one of the most disturbing films ever made. And of course, I'm talking about the 2014 film, Tusk. Tusk is about a US podcaster played by Justin Long who ventures out into the Canadian wilderness to interview an old man for his podcast. He found out about this old man by reading a letter of his in a bathroom that he was in and decided that this was going to be a huge break for him. So he goes to this old man's house in the middle of the wild and interviews him and figures out that he has a pretty extraordinary past. And eventually he would learn that this man has a really weird, dark secret about a walrus. Putting a cringe warning right here because this film has a lot of body horror that a lot of people might not be able to stomach, but if you are able to stomach body horror, this might be a video for you to watch. So sit back, relax, and let's talk about Tusk. So Tusk opens up on Justin Long's character Wallace, who we get a pretty good idea as to what kind of person he is. He's kind of a jerk and really only cares about his podcast and not the people that he puts on his podcast. He's mean to the people around him, he's not polite, and everything is basically about him. He has a girlfriend named Allison, and even in their relationship, he kind of is just an asshole. And of course, all that attitude and personality problems will be getting him into a pretty dark area in his life in a little bit. Well, he ends up going to a bar after a failed attempt to interview a kid who ended up videoing himself cutting off his leg with a katana, which by the way looks very fake, but in the movie it's very real, and he complains on the phone about how the kid missing the leg couldn't wait 2 more days so that he could interview him because the kid ended up dying. Well, then he goes to the bathroom in which he finds this letter that is on the wall that talks about the story of a man in the Canadian wilderness. Then he comes across 2 teenage clerks in a convenience store and again is mean to them. Well, he ends up getting the directions to the old man in the wilderness and then takes a trip which is about 2 hours away from where he is. And then he comes out to finally interview the old man about his story. And at first, it's going really well. They're having a good conversation. The man is being really helpful with the story and telling everything about it. But then he ends up passing out because he spiked his tea. And then he wakes up in a wheelchair, very drugged and confused, while the old man is sitting across from him, polishing what looks like a bone. Turns out that the man had cut off his leg and was polishing his bone right in front of him. And then there's a really good scene between the old man and Wallace in which Wallace begins to lose his absolute mind, which, might I add, Justin Long is incredible in this film and is by far the best part of the movie. But this is just the very first part of the old man's evil plan. Wallace would end up getting access to his phone again after the old man took it earlier, and he is trying his best to call for help. And like I said, Justin Long putting in a fantastic performance, he ends up getting hit in the back of the head with the bone of a walrus penis. And then back home, his girlfriend finally receives the voicemail that he left her, and she gets very scared about what's happening. Then we're cut to a scene in which the old man is stitching up something, but the camera never shows us what we're seeing except for blueprints behind him that show a humanoid walrus. And then we get a shot of Wallace on the table in which both of his legs are missing now, and his arms are now stitched to his side. And then we get the biggest reveal of this insanely disturbing movie. Wallace has been turned into a walrus. A very disturbing turn of events in which Wallace is now in a walrus suit made out of other human skin, and he now has to live as a walrus. It was evil of Kevin Smith to make his name Wallace, and he had to turn into a walrus. And if things weren't already bad enough, Wallace ends up falling into the water, playing with the old man because the old man is making him do all these things, and he ends up seeing that there was another person that had been turned into a walrus but had died previously. Another really amazing part of this movie is Johnny Depp's cameo, in which he plays a really badass detective, and might I say, he's a really funny character. And then, by the end of the film, the old man ends up putting himself into a walrus costume, but just the skin. He's not actually a walrus, so that he can do some pretty messed up things with Wallace. But then Wallace gets the upper hand and ends up stabbing him with the tusks that are now embedded into his face, killing him. And then we get a really cool shot, in my opinion, of Johnny Depp's detective character bursting into the room right after Wallace had killed the old man with his tusks and points a shotgun up, and then the screen goes completely black. Which, when I was watching this movie for the first time, I thought that's where it was going to end. Boy, was I wrong. When I was watching this for the first time a while ago, I actually was pretty much enjoying the film up until the very last couple minutes of it, because it turns out that his girlfriend, or ex-girlfriend now, and his buddy, who actually was his partner on his podcast, who is now her new boyfriend, they end up taking Wallace to a facility for animals to live out the rest of their lives. Like, this was the point in the movie where I was just like, this is too silly for its own well-being, because why not put him out of his misery? What facility would ever take this thing and just it made it so confusing, because up until the very end of the film, I was thoroughly enjoying it. Yes, it's a very messed up and very disturbing film, and I've only watched it once ever because I don't ever plan on watching it again, but I do remember actually being thrilled. It was very thrilling, it was very scary and eerie, and then up until the very couple last minutes of the film, it got very silly. It would have had such a better impact if the film did end on that black screen in which Johnny Depp's detective character either shot him, or it was, left up to be, left to the ambiguity of it all, and that would have been much better. But the fact that it ended in which now his character has to live the rest of his life being fed fish, put yourself into their shoes. This is the most confusing thing ever. Tusk will forever go down as one of the most disturbing and messed up movies of all time. I don't know what Kevin Smith had going on in his head to make this, but he 100% had an idea and went full force with it. And like I said, Justin Long is fantastic in horror movies, and it's really awesome to see him starting to show up in more movies nowadays, having been in Barbarian, and he was in that Christmas horror movie that came out last year, and he's in a new comedy film called the 4:30 movie coming out this year. Justin Long is just a really great actor. But anyways, is this one of the most disturbing movies that you've ever seen? Because in my opinion, it's the most disturbing movie that I have ever seen. And let me know what you think about it, because a lot of people hate this, a lot of people like it, and me personally, I do like the movie, but I absolutely hate the ending with all of my being. But that will do it for the end of this video. Thank you so much for sticking around to the very end of the video. I appreciate every single one of you. Make sure to like and subscribe if you like these kind of videos and want to see more of them. And yeah, I will see you in the next video. And remember, your movie moment is right around the corner.